Hey, welcome back to Rush Auto Garage and the $5,000 budget build 56 Chevy pickup. Just figuring it's been about 7 months since I started building this thing, and it's just about a running and driving truck. There's no seats in it yet because I want to finish the under dash stuff before I put the seats in. And that brings us to the last, I don't know what to say, major project before this thing will be able to run and drive out of the building. And that will be air conditioning, which is kind of ridiculous because it's so cold right now. It's December. If I get this AC working, I don't even know how I'm going to test it, because the vent temperatures where you look for 40 to 45 degrees, we're way below that. So I don't even know if I'll be able to test this thing to know if I did it right. You see the tube behind me, the white and the black tube, that's pushing heat into the cab. So at least I can work in there without totally freezing. I know I'm still going to freeze my feet, but at least I can work. Now, disclaimer, I am not an air conditioning expert. In fact, I'm not even an air conditioning amateur. But I do like to try new things, and I like to experiment and do whatever. So, based on the little bit of research I've done, I will try to give you some information. And I am trying to do this, of course, as low buck as possible. And I'm even not doing it as cheap as I could, and I'll explain what happened. But pretty much, I'm going to be putting everything brand new in this air conditioning kit. Every part's going to be new, but I am piecing together a setup. I'm not buying a kit, because even those I think are probably $800 or more. I'm hoping to have around $500 in this air conditioning setup complete. We'll see what it works out to. I think I have all the parts on order now. I'm still waiting on a couple things, but I have enough to get started. I'm gonna try to keep this video as simple as possible. Initially I was gonna get more in depth with it, but I'm not an expert, so I really don't think I should. So let me just explain the hardware that I am going to use, that you will need. This is a TXV type air conditioning system. If you are building yourself or even getting a kit, an aftermarket kit, but starting with nothing, most likely I'd have to say that's what you're going to have. I mean, the TXV valve, that TXV valve is on the back. That's this guy here, the back of the evaporator with the sensing bulb. So if you see that TXV valve, you're building a TXV system. And that is what I am building. And I'm only saying that because there are differences between a TXV system and a fixed orifice system. I'm not even going to talk about the fixed orifice system. I'm going to try to keep this simple. All right, hardware. I'm going to go over the hardware needed to build this system, and then a couple differences in what I'm building versus maybe as if you bought a kit. So you obviously need a compressor. You need a condenser. You need a receiver dryer. You need a evaporator. You need hoses to connect all these things. And you also need a binary or a trinary switch. Okay, now this is all for the TXV style system. Now, where things are different between my setup and maybe if you bought a kit, is I am keeping my Silverado compressor, and the outlets on that are not the same as a regular AC fitting. So you have to buy an adapter block that bolts onto the compressor. No big deal. Then the other variable is the binary or the trinary switch. Now what the binary switch or trinary switch does is a couple things. First off, you say right now, if you're running a mechanical fan, you just need a binary switch, and that's what I'm going to be using. If you're running electrical fans, you're going to want a trinary switch, and that does two things instead of the binary switch, which just does one. In my system, the binary switch is going to be on the high side of the system, and it's going to be a safety switch. If the pressures get too low, it'll turn off. And if the pressures get too high, it'll turn off. Now the trinary switch will do one more thing. Not only will it act as your safety switch, it'll also turn on your electric fans. You can use it to send a signal to your electric fan relay and turn on your electric fans. So in my situation, I'm just putting the binary switch in. All it is a safety. You have to have a safety switch in your AC system no matter what it is, because you don't want to run your compressor if you had a leak and lost your refrigerant. Reason being, the refrigerant also carries lubrication oil. So if you've got no refrigerant, you're not lubricating your compressor, and if you run it with nothing, you're going to burn it up and it's going to be junk. I will go over the wiring system, the wiring setup after it's done. We'll talk about it, or as it's going, but needless to say, you can do controls on this a couple different ways. I'm doing an LS swap. So I'm going to use, like I said, my factory LS compressor. But not only that, I'm going to use the PCM to control my air conditioning. The only reason I'm doing that is to try it, for one. And what that does is it'll raise the idle a little bit when the air conditioning's on to compensate for the load. Is it necessary? I don't know. If you had a carbureted system, they would use like a little kicker solenoid or something that if you turn on the AC, it would bump the idle up a little bit that way. I don't know if the engine would stall without it or not, but I am going to use the PCM to control it. And in the end, we'll talk about how I'm wiring this to control it via PCM, and we'll also talk about how you can wire it if you're doing a carbureted small block or whatever, something without a PCM, and make this work. It's really not hard at all to do. Wiring is not difficult on this system. So we will go over all of that. But first, I'm just going to concentrate on the hardware and getting everything installed, and then going on from there. So for hardware, compressor, obviously, gonna mount to the block. Because, like I said, I'm using the LS1 compressor. Here's my adapter. This particular compressor, I think it's an HU6, uses a single bolt adapter. And this is what you need to bolt to that compressor and turn it into standard number 8 and number 10 AC fittings. There are a couple different models of Gen 3 LS compressors. There's a Denso as well, and that uses 2 separate adapters, and they sell those as well all over. But you need to have that. If you're going to do this, if you're doing a carbureted small block or something, your compressor is probably a sanded and it already has the correct connections to go to these hoses. So out of the compressor, you're going to have a high pressure hose, number 8 hose, number 8 fittings. It's going to go out of the compressor to your condenser, which is mounted in front of the radiator. It's normally going to attach to the top of the condenser, and you won't be able to mess it up because the fittings are different sizes. Now my condenser is a little different than what you normally see because I have a built-in dryer. This guy on the side. Most of the time that is a separate unit, but because that's there, my hoses are going to be a little bit different. So in my situation, like I said, I have my number 8 hose going into my condenser at the top, and on the bottom, if you had a separate dryer, you would have a hose, number 6 hose of that hose, number 6 hose, out of the condenser into the dryer and then into the evaporator. Because my dryer is mounted right to my condenser, all I need to do is run a number 6 hose from my condenser right into my evaporator. But I'm going to put my binary switch on there first. So on the outlet of my condenser is going to be my binary switch, which is going to be my safety switch on the high side. And then that number 6 hose will run from there into the evaporator. Then we're going to have a number 10 hose out of the evaporator, low pressure hose, back to the compressor. Hope that wasn't too confusing. The reason, again, and because of this condenser I bought with the built-in dryer, it changes things a little bit. That's why my binary switch is going to be mounted right to my condenser. If you have a separate dryer, that'll have a port on it, and usually you'll screw your switch right onto that port. So you would just have a hose, a number 6 hose from the condenser to the dryer, and a number 6 from the dryer to the evaporator. And then on that dryer, there's a port. You can put your binary switch or your trinary switch, whatever you're going to use. Don't have that. So hope that was probably pretty confusing. But as we install things, you'll see how things go. And what I'll do is I will do this step by step, and we'll go through it all. Obviously, I had already mounted my condenser. That's just mounting it. That's done. We will get into mounting the evaporator, compressor. That's going to depend on what you have, your system. So I'm not going to go over mounting my compressor, but I will go over the evaporator install, each hose, the binary switch, and then in the end we'll go over controls. And hopefully it won't be too crazy, because it's really not that complicated. If you can put these fittings together and do it without making a leak, you'll be all right. And of course, I don't even know if I'll be able to do it without making a leak. I'm going to make all my own hoses. I'm going to get the Master Cool crimper tool to do these fittings, and I am going to charge it myself. You may not want to do that. I'm going to give it a shot, and you know, hopefully we'll go through this together and it won't be too crazy, and hopefully it'll work. So we'll try to keep it simple if I can, and let's see what happens. The reason this changed from going some new parts to all new parts is because of this guy. This is what originally I was going to use. If you saw the video, I showed how to wire this up. This is a 1960s Mark IV underdash evaporator. Very cool looking, period correct. It's just too big. What happened was I mocked this up before I put my homemade heater in there, and now with the heater in there, it's just too far over to the driver's side. I could make it work, but it just looks bad. It just looks too big. So because I was going to reuse that, and it's other than the electrical, I have no idea if it was going to work or not. I was going to reuse my 2001 Silverado compressor and just see what happened, because what's the difference? Why put a brand new compressor on there if that evaporator is going to leak? I wasn't going to know until I pumped the system down. Well, since that won't work, I ended up buying an eBay underdash evaporator unit, which was really not much more money than that was used. So this is the evaporator I bought, which is much lighter. It's all plastic. Now, it's not as cool looking as the Mark IV, but I think this front cover comes off, and maybe when the weather gets above frozen toes, I could spray these vents with maybe some chrome paint, and maybe even spray some flake on this front cover and make it match the dash more. The other advantage of this versus the Mark IV is this is all modern connections, O-ring type, no flare. It's also a brand new TXV valve, and I had no idea if the one was any good on that. So this does have its advantages to use. So I think this will fit under there okay, a little bit better. And just to make that, or just to check it out, I'll show you I made a little bit more room under the dash for this as well. So let's see what it looks like. All right, inside the cab, I have a floor jack in here to help lift up the evaporator. I was using that when I was playing around with the Mark IV. Yesterday, I redid everything under the dash. I moved my PCM. It used to be mounted there. Now that stud is going to be used to help mount the back of the evaporator. I got myself a neat little Corvette emblem for my heater, so I put that on there. And I moved my PCM up under there in the corner, and I have my relay box here now. So I moved all that stuff around to try to get some more depth under the dash, and we'll see how that works I think that'll be a lot better as far as getting the unit up underneath here. I think that's where it's going to be. It does stick out a little bit, but it fits. I don't think there's any way for something like this to not look bulky. It's just the nature of the beast. It is, you know, a certain size and is what it is. If the firewall didn't have such a big bulge into the cab, you could get it in deeper, but I think that's pretty much where it's going to have to be. This is probably the hardest part of the whole job, is just getting this mounted in a spot and getting the hoses connected. The hoses are going to have to run underneath my heater, which is not ideally what I wanted. Try not to make them look ugly. Maybe I'll have to make a little cover for them or something, but that is just what it is. So I'm gonna get this mounted. They do give you a bracket, this guy here, that can bolt to the bottom of the dash and then connect to the sides of the evaporator. So I'm gonna see if I can get that mounted, and I'll probably have to mock up the fittings too and just see what things are looking like. All right, it's mounted, and it really doesn't look that bad. You know, the more you stare at it, I guess the more you accept it. I guess that's just how it is. All right, we are back. It has been a few weeks since I worked on the $5,000 budget 56 Chevy truck, and I've done a few small things here and there to it to move it along. It now runs and drives, but, you know, with no seat in it yet because I'm still working on the air conditioning, which is what we're going to continue with. All right, before we get it back on the air conditioning, well, I still have a little daylight, and today is actually not a bad day. It's probably 40 degrees, which feels like 60 or 70 right now, the way it's been. I got the hood on the truck, obviously. What else do we do? Let's go over a few things that are done on the truck now before we get back to the AC. It's just small stuff I did in between working on the Mule 5.3, and so that engine's in the corner. We'll come back to that at some point, put cam bearings in it maybe and throw a cam in it, but no time soon. We'll be putting a cam in a 6-liter before that gets done. But first we got to finish this truck up. So let's go over a few things I did while I wasn't filming. All right, so obviously we still have to put the grill in, but that won't be until after the AC lines are finished. We already talked about that. I have my cold air intake put in there. I was going to run something through the fender and everything and put it out there, and I changed my mind, so that's fine. Made a little tab here to hold it so it's secure. That's good. The hood is obviously on. I got a set of wipers for the truck, new wipers, and probably good used, looks like really nice good used arms I found on eBay for cheap. Well, at least reasonable, I'd say, because man, people want a lot of money for that stupid stuff. It's insane. What else do we do? Do we do anything else? I think inside here is all the same. We're ready to start making hoses. I think I already showed you my emblem I got for my heater there. I think that's that. Is that all I did, was wipers and a hood and a cold air intake? Man, that may be it. All right, it's been a few weeks, like I said, since I've touched the truck. Wasn't quite sure where I left off. I had to remind myself. So I got my parts. This is my inline fitting with a binary switch. It's going to go on my outlet of my condenser. I got some PAG 150 oil to put on my O-rings when I put them in, because this compressor that I'm using uses PAG 150. They are not all the same, so whatever compressor you use, make sure you get the right oil. And then I bought a 2-fitting bulkhead for the AC lines to go through the firewall, and it's a little cleaner, maybe a little easier than running through and have to worry about grommets and such, but of course it's just makes more places where you can have leaks, but it is what it is. Let's put this in and go from there. All right, so for my bulkhead, after doing some measuring inside the cab, looks like we're gonna be around there. And I'll put the larger number 10 hose on top, just because that works out better for how the evaporator is, and should work fine. I'll probably use 90-degree fittings, we'll see, but drill some holes for this fittings to go through there, and keep on moving. All right, so I was in the middle of making the AC hoses, and I'll show you some stuff with that, but I was like, oh, I better put my my new AC compressor on rather than make the hoses with the old compressor installed. I might as well just put the new one on. Well, good thing I opened it up, because that's not right. That's a mounting tab. Here's the rest of it. That's how it came out of the box, unfortunately, from Rock Auto. And I look at the packaging, and sure enough, somebody threw this thing off a cliff or something, but didn't see it till after I took it out of the package. But I filed for a return. It's going to delay us. So can't finish the hoses, but I'll show you some stuff on the hoses at least. So making AC hoses is really easy if you have the tool to do it. And that is a Master Cool kit. Let me get the part number for you. All right, so here's the toolkit that I'm using to make my AC fittings. It's a Master Cool Kit 71550. And I'm not an AC expert, but I'll let you know what I've learned over time. First off, this tool works fantastic. And all it is basically a crimper that you put in a vise, and you have different sets of dies for different size of AC fittings. And you just put this in a vise, put your fitting in there, and crush it. It works great. Now, some details. This kit comes with common sizes that you're going to need, and that would be 6, 8, 10, or 12. Now that's called, or what should I say, those are the standard sizes for AC fittings. If you dig in further to AC fittings, you're also going to see RB type fittings, which is a smaller hose. I think it's just RB for reduced barrier. And they are smaller diameter, so if you didn't want, they're not as big as a standard hose. So like, this is a number 6 standard hoses. That's all I use are standard sizes. And you know, you have a diameter here. This is probably 3/4 of an inch. Well, the RB size would be a smaller diameter. So if you wanted to, I don't know why you would use RB other than tight spaces, or maybe those hoses are more flexible. But what I'm trying to say here is that this kit will only do the standard size fittings. There are extra slots here, so I assume they also make a kit that will do the RB fittings as well, but I do not have it. So that's what I'm working with, but it works great. And making AC hoses is really very easy with this. You just take a fitting, like this is number 6. Notice it has the hole there. You take a number 6 hose, push the fitting all the way in, and you'll know it's all the way in because the hose will be in that hole, so you know it's all the way in there. And then with this in the vise, you just put your sleeve right in there, if I can show you, like that, with a little bit sticking out on each end, and crush it down. And you just tighten it up until it bottoms out. And it works great. And the only detail I can say is when you do put it in your tool, you know, you try to center up the die with the collar there. Once you've done it a few times, you're used to it. You know how much to see sticking out of the tool there to crush it correctly. It's really easy. But, oh yeah, one important thing when making these hoses, you can probably crimp one end first and then, you know, attach it to your hardware and run the hose over and mark the other end. But when you mock up the other end, make sure you slide it into the fitting and then take a marker and mark the fitting and the hose with a line like that, so that when you put it in your tool and crimp it, this guy is facing the right direction, because this hose does not twist. If you put that facing the wrong way, you're going to be remaking your hose. And one more thing. There's always one more thing as I'm putting this away here. This guy here, this is a specific tool for cutting air conditioning hose. It works fantastic. I would use this instead of, you know, a utility knife or something, because this makes the cut perfectly straight, so it fits all the way into the fitting nicely. It just makes life easy, and it's not expensive. If you're going to do this stuff, I would get one. It's worth it, at least in my mind. So I think I'm going to have to end this video here, because I don't know when I'm going to get my AC compressor. They probably have to approve the return, get it shipped out to me, you know, that BS. So at least it's freezing cold out and it's not as big a deal, but it just delays me. So once that comes back, I will finish up making the AC hoses and show you what it looks like. And then the next video will go over the control system of the air conditioning, the wiring and the electrical, how I did it and how you could do it if you don't want to use the PCM. And we may go over the vacuuming out system and charging it at that time too. It all just depends what we're doing. Maybe that'll be a separate video. I don't know. But this one's definitely done. So I'm going to stand still so I get my parts. So anyway, I guess that's it. Okay, say thank you very much for watching. Thank you for subscribing. You know the deal. And I really appreciate it. So we will see you on the next one. See ya.